Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. Delighted to be joined yet again by the wonderful Mike Batt. How are you doing, Mike?
Very well, thank you. Lovely to be back.
It's lovely to have you back. And we were touching last time on your relationship with Liberty Records, and you walked away from them having a very unfair contract, heavily weighted in their interest. How did walking away from the contract affect your relationship with Liberty and others in the music industry at the time?
Oh, I don't think it really mattered that much. The people there were lovely and they knew the contract had been rubbish. We hadn't had a hit. Had we had a hit while I'd been there, they might have struggled and kicked a bit more. And had we had a hit when I'd been there, I probably wouldn't have wanted to have left. So it swings and roundabouts, but I kept in touch with. I mean, Ray, as you say, Ray Williams is a friend of yours. Ray had left by the time I left, but I'm still in touch with quite a lot of people. Sadly, the guy who signed me, the head of the company, he's no longer around. But yeah, very nice people that I kept in touch with throughout my life.
Yeah. And it's been an interesting evolution, if you like, in the industry where it was trying to find its own feet, trying to work out what's fair for the artist. Looking back at those early stages, would you have done something differently?
Well, at the time, I was just pleased that anybody wanted to sign me. It was like, hooray, somebody signed me. And my dad said, what do you get out of it? And I said, I can't really think. And just, I've got a company interested in helping me to become a pop star. And that's all I need, you know. What are they paying you? Oh, nothing. Well, but what they did do, I tell you what they did do. They gave me work writing top lines. Now, but these days, a top line means part of a collaborative songwriting trio or duo or team. In those days, a top line meant a lead sheet, which is something that you needed to be able to give to record producers when you were trying to sell them as songs. And my publisher, Alan, would have Jeff Lynne, for example, of the then of the band Idle Race, and of course later of ELO and Traveling Wilbury fame. And Jeff came in, and we were mates, and he got me to play accordion on a couple of his records and that sort of thing, and write some strings actually. But at the earliest time of all, the reason we met was because I'd written the top lines, not a compositional function, purely as a scribe. You know, so I would listen to these very fuzzy cassettes that you could hardly even hear the bass line. You had to work out what the bass line was, write it in. You had to work out what the top line of the singer was, what the lyrics were, and write it all in so that when it was just a basic sheet music, so that if Alan was selling the song to somebody else, or even just for copyright registration purposes, they needed to have it written down. So that was my job, and I got um, 10, um, 10 shillings, which is 50p for those, for most of your listeners, I presume, would need that explaining. Um, but so I got 50p a go. So if I did, you know, if I did 20 a week, I got £10, which
Yeah.
was, this is before I was hired as an A&R man. It was just about enough to live on in those days. You know, I wasn't paying rent. I was living down in Winchester with my parents, but it was £2 train fare up to London. Or I borrowed my mum's old 1100, Austin 1100, and drove the 60 miles. Then after that, I was living with my girlfriend and rather unhelpfully not paying much rent anyway. And my outgoings weren't really that much in those days. So 10 quid a week as a top line writer was fine for somebody who had the attention of a record company who was trying to make me into a star.
Yeah. And it's a pattern throughout history when people first get signed. They are signing to these crazy deals, is the best way of sort of putting it, terribly onerous terms, because it is that promise of stardom, isn't it? That's the biggest thing. People didn't really care much about the money, they just wanted to be a star.
And of course, a lot of boy bands and girl bands, obviously there's boys and girls in bands, but a lot of people in manufactured bands or bands that are put together by somebody who's controlling it, They're yeah, they're just delighted to be famous, and their fame actually is a commodity that is valuable to them in a commercial way, because they can go off and do their own projects. They get free stuff, and they have a job. They get paid anyway. So there are lots and lots of upside things to being recruited to be in a boy band even now. Because the bad news is you have to share all the royalties with four, five, six, seven other people, and it's you're probably going to have to wait until the next level of your career before you actually can capitalize on your fame.
Yeah, and absolutely, and a lot of people now but even today they will turn around and say, "Oh, come and do this gig or that gig. It'd be great for publicity." And
Oh
I
yeah.
always say, "Well,
Oh
publicity doesn't necessarily put bread on the table or feed your family."
yeah, that old one. Yeah, do it for the yeah, exactly, for the
Yeah.
publicity.
Well, I always say that a fee is a fair exchange of energy, and if there's a benefit there, and it swings and roundabouts and so on and so forth, that you're there. A lot of people they'll be watching this and thinking, well, okay, well that was the 70s. It still happens to this day where people are signing contracts in that promise of fame. What advice would you give to them?
Oh, well, if you're not au fait with contracts and you need some help, get some help. There's always somebody who might advise you for free. There's somebody who might uh, you might have to pay for a lawyer, but and if you can, you should. Uh, if you can't, you can very often get good advice from people. There's always somebody if you're that if you've done the homework to get to know enough people, which again speaks to my little mantra that everyone used to say, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
And my answer to that was always yes, but you've got to get to know people. You've got to socialize. You've got to, what's the word? Put yourself around the room, and you've got to network. That's the word. And by the time you've done a bit of networking, you will find someone who's a friendly and fair-minded person who will say, "Let me just have a look at that contract for you because I could probably advise you."
Yeah.
Um, and um, and that's what I would advise to anyone these
Yeah.
days who's about to sign something.
Yeah, and they have clauses in contracts now saying that they have been told to take legal advice and they've taken that legal advice and been advised on the terms because otherwise people have been
Yeah,
getting out of contracts.
exactly. And contracts, generally speaking, are much fairer today because case law has made bigger companies, or all companies, afraid of giving horrible contracts like the one I had to people because they know that they'll do what I did, which is to walk straight out.
Yeah.
And there are famous other clauses, the Elton John clause, the Elton John case against Dick James, where Elton won, quite a lot of money, I think, from I don't think he got his catalogue back. I'm not sure, but he that was a case which every lawyer working for a record company would have taken and publishing company would have taken note and said, "Ah, well, we better not do that. We'll make sure it's a bit fairer than that." And then there was the Tony McCauley case. I think it was a bit earlier than that, where Tony McCauley thought his contract, a famous songwriter, he thought his contract wasn't very fair, and he sued and he created case law, which has been very beneficial for all of us going forward. So as we've progressed forward, albeit there are these new technologies coming at us all the time, there need to be test cases. I know you do at some point want to talk about AI, and there are test cases going on which will create case law for the future. Um, a- Whenever there's a new technology, then there's somebody who has probably another way of either ripping you off or it becoming a good thing for you.
Yeah.
Probably both, depending on how well you play it.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And the reason history repeats itself is because people don't learn the lessons from history. And the whole idea, and this is why we wanted to emphasize the point, is the whole idea of punctuating the emphasis on fairness. Because if you're fair to the creators, then it works for both sides. And I think that's the thing. My background's as an intellectual property lawyer, so I advised a number of major artists looking at some of their early contracts. I remember when they started doing things like CDs, and those early contracts only spoke about records basically, or the recordings at that particular time in history, and therefore you could renegotiate it, which is why record companies started putting in phrases like in all media whether now known or hereafter invented. And so the law
Exactly.
evolves, but we need
Uh,
to understand that whole concept of fairness, don't we?
yeah, and I remember looking in one of my contracts. It was actually with Sony in the probably early 80s, and it said any territory or hereafter, including the whole of the universe. I
Yes.
said, "Why do you want to sign me for the whole of the universe?" And they said, "Well, just in case, who knows?" Yeah, and I said, "Really, honestly, you think we're going to sort of have a radio station on Mars or something?" But you know what? There were things like satellites that got
Yep.
invented, and people. But I remember when I was on the council for the PRS, there was a lot of piracy going on by people bouncing stuff off satellites
Yes.
and coming down, and we were trying to work out whether there was a law that would allow us to deem the transmission to the satellite as a transmission, which is a licensable
Yes.
act that we could prevent or charge for, or whether it was something that we hadn't got a law to cover. And in fact, the law did cover the up leg, as we called it. The famous word was the up leg, because you had the up leg to the satellite, which
Yeah.
was a licensed transmission. Therefore, it fell under the PRS's responsibility. And little things like that, looking back on it, I've even forgotten almost
Yeah.
about that. But yeah, I mean, that's why intellectual property lawyers are, required for
Oh,
and
absolutely. But it's understanding, it's that combination of technology and understanding artists' rights. And I think there's that fundamental thing. What copyright law does is effectively make sure that the creators are rewarded. And as technology evolves, we need to make sure that still happens. And we talk about the universe, whether now known or hereafter, created or invented or whatever. And obviously, you've got Elon Musk. His father, Errol, is on the Andrew Eborn show all of the time. So I speak to him about that. And he's talking
oh,
about populating Mars. So your clause is now relevant.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah. So maybe one day I'll be big on Mars.
Absolutely. I won't go for the obvious gag, but yes, it'd be good. No, we love that interplanetary stuff. It's going to be good. Now, you mentioned Elton John a few times and Bernie Taupin. Did your paths cross again after those sort of initial auditioning alongside them?
Yes, mainly socially. I don't. Well, we've never made a record together. Elton and I were both signed to Dick James at the same time. So we would. I remember sitting in an office, both waiting for our check to be signed, our weekly check. And because Elton was on a retainer, you called it a stipend earlier,
Yes.
and I wasn't, but I might have been there chasing a bill for an string arrangement I might have done or something. I remember we were sitting in the same office, sort of as two young people waiting to be paid. And so and when I was in Australia on my boat, I went around. Part of my book, by the way, to your listeners, that's out at the moment. The middle section is devoted to my going around the world on a boat. And it happened that when we were in Sydney, excuse me, when we were in Sydney, the Elton John band were around, and we knew them, and Elton and so on. And he had a birthday party at the Siebel Townhouse Hotel, where the cake. This is not in the book, but the cake was. How can I describe this verbally without being you being carted off to prison for broadcasting it? The cake was a very giant version of a non-Caucasian gentleman's genitalia. Um, and so that was quite a wild party. And the next day, all of his band actually, not Elton. I think he might have had a bit of a hangover. But anyway, the whole band, Dee Murray and the drummer Nigel, and all the band all came aboard our boat, and we went for a trip around Sydney Harbour. So yeah, I mean, from time to time, Elton and I, bump into each other at the Ivor Novello Awards or something like that. But we're not bosom buddies. I'm not claiming that we're close friends. I'm just saying we know each other and we know of each other.
Yeah. Compare notes on Ray.
Compare notes on what?
On Ray Williams.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
What
quite,
what's
quite.
your favorite? I mean, I say Ray's a chum. What's your favorite memory of Ray Williams?
I don't know about a favorite memory, but I do remember Ray being. I mean, he was quite a character because he walked into his office as the one was supposed to be the pop star, and the A&R man. I describe it in my book. He was. I say he was 20 years old. I was 18.
Yeah.
So he was. I looked up to him in terms of age, but uh, there's the A&R man waiting to sort of see you, and he's swinging London personified, and I describe him as a younger, better looking version of Robert Redford.
Oh, he would
Because
love that. It's got to be good.
yeah, he did love it. I've sent him the book, but he was like almost like computer graphics level good looking. And I can't imagine what fun he must have had with the ladies, or I can. And he knew it, and it was just part of his whole thing. But he didn't want to be a pop star. He said he's always said he couldn't sing anyway. Um, but he knew all the beautiful people in town, and he's very good for. But I said, how can you afford to? I know how much you know vaguely how much people make at record companies, which wasn't very much. So, are you? I can't remember what the question, how it was phrased. I said it was more. The question was probably, how can I get myself to look like you, basically. And of course, facially, that was never going to be possible. But he said, well, you could get yourself a suit because he was always in a very smart, colourful, very stylish suit
Yes.
with a tie, which was a kipper tie. Therefore, it was fashionable. It wasn't just the sort of businessman's accountancy suit. He just looked $1 million. And I thought, wow, I'd like to look like that. He said, well, get yourself, I'll take you around to Austin Reed, which was a 5 minute walk from where we were in Mayfair, our offices in Mayfair. We went to the Regent Street version of Austin Reed, which I think was the flagship shop. And we went down into the basement and he introduced me to the guy there. And we set up a £5 a month account. And I spent it all on a suit, one suit. It was a RAF coloured, RAF blue, kind of
Yes.
like that, slightly greyish blue, nice sort of really, really lovely suit with bell bottoms, of course, which was all the rage, and a tie and that was pretty much my uniform because I could only afford one suit. So I wore that every day. I had a couple of other cooler things like a leather jacket, which was sewed together from little bits and pieces, which I think I bought in Portobello Market. A few things like that. But otherwise, I was the sort of suit wearing A&R man, and that I got that from Ray Williams. But Ray Williams could carry it off and look cool at the same time, whereas I just looked like an innocent bloke who had been taught how to open an Austin Reed credit account.
Oh, glorious. The very happy memories with Ray. It's interesting. Now, tell me then, how did you start to get involved with the Wombles?
Well, when I left Liberty Records, I was still signed to them as an artist. I left them for publishing and I'd left them as an executive, but I was still signed to them and I made a few singles, one of which did well on radio and therefore was, I'm sure you know the term, it was deemed to be a turntable hit. And it was a cover version of Your Mother Should Know, the Paul McCartney song from the Magical Mystery Tour. And I did a kind of Vivaldi-esque string quartet version of it and sang it. Um, and now I've forgotten what the question was.
It starting your relationship with the Wombles.
Oh yeah. So there I was doing, and I was doing the top lines for Alan Keane still. So I was still making enough money to pay the rent. I was living in a little flat in Earl's Court, just by the tube station, just up over the road from the exhibition centre. And I used to work there at my piano most of the days, songwriting, doing arrangements. I remember Johnny Nash, suddenly his manager rang up and said, uh, for those who don't know, too young, he was quite a well-known reggae sort of I think he was Jamaican
Yes.
singer. He had a few hits, and they wanted a cabaret arrangement for a couple of trumpets and a trombone. And so that's how I made my living. It was basically I would do work for hire, and that's how I got into. That's how I developed my art. In fact, the whole reason I left Liberty wasn't the money. I'd already walked out of the contract and still stayed employed for a while. They didn't kick me out. But after about 18 months, I realized I didn't want to be a record executive. I wanted to be, a pop star. So I went off, and the other thing I wanted to do was spend time continuing to teach myself to do orchestral arranging and conducting, and that takes time and it takes experience. So if you want to be hired, if I want to be hired as an arranger and conductor, I need to be available and not going to see a band somewhere in Covent Garden. I need to be on the job as a practitioner of what I wanted to do, and it worked, because I did teach myself and continue to get hired. The I did the string arrangements and brass arrangements on the family music in a doll's house,
Right.
which was one of the first jobs I ever did, and that was while I was still at Liberty. And that was again an interesting experience that will take me way too long to tell you about on your show, but hopefully it'll be an incentive for people to go and buy my
Oh
book.
no, everything's an incentive to buy the book. We've been drip feeding little teasers throughout, which is good, including the names of that billiard ball table owner for that
Oh
extreme
yeah.
experience. So no, good stuff. But the one I want to look at, the one was good. It's another example of how you sort of bucked the trend, if you like, because you were offered what was, I understand, the princely sum of £200 fee in exchange
Oh
for the rights to the songs. Talk to me about that.
yeah, you see, that's the danger of having a chat with me, is that I go off down all these little rabbit holes and then don't answer the question you asked.
Oh no, you're a brilliant politician, Mike. I love it.
No, it wasn't that at all. I wasn't deliberately avoiding it. I was just literally forgetting that I'm trying to give you so much information that by the time I've given it to you, I've forgotten why you asked it. But it does tag onto the fact that I was making my living as an arranger and composer for hire
Yes.
and singer, and anything else that people would offer me to do in terms of conducting or whatever. And I had an agent for jingles, and I did a few jingles for Guinness. I did Smarties, Harmony hairspray, all sorts of things, cornflakes. And my agent was a lady called Liz Chan, and she rang me and said they've got this thing. The BBC are doing it. It's a production company would like to meet you to see if you'd like to write a tune, a little ditty, whatever, for it. And it was the Wombles. And so I went along, and Ivor Wood, who is the animator and designer of the characters, said, right, well, we'd love a signature tune. And I said, well, these are great characters, the Great Uncle Bulgaria and Orinoco and all of these characters. Everybody knows the names, or who anyone who knows the Wombles knows their
Yes.
names anyway. Um, I said, I'd quite like to write a song. How about a song? Because then a song would maybe already give something up to little children who are going to watch the show, some information about what it's all about. So they said, "Oh, that sounds fun. Why don't you do it?" And I was living on a houseboat at the time in West Byfleet on the canal, and I had a little piano. It was, where the piano keyboard folded up into the body of the piano, so you could get past in the very tiny space of the narrow boat. And so I wrote this little tune with this da 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 da. Da. Well, that's quite nice. And then I just got that underground, overground. I don't know where it came from because that's those words don't appear in the books, and neither does Wombling Free. Neither does Wombling actually. Because I claim that I put that Union Jack onto that Mount Everest by inventing the word wombling. In other words, as a verb, because the
Right.
wombles, but they didn't go wombling in the books. They went wombling in the songs. Um, anyway, so anyway, as if a big deal, as if it matters who thought that up.
Oh no, no,
Anyway,
I absolutely think it matters, and crediting credit where credit's due. The man who invented the word wombly is important and a thing to add to your accolades.
and the reason they wombled free was because it's rhymed with the wombles are we. The
Yeah, there
womble
you see. It's
for the
got to be
common are
good.
we. Walking around with are we. Oh, free. We're wombling free. That's what we're doing. Okay, write that down. And I wrote it down. I wrote most of the lyrics on the train on the way into London to see the guys at the production company. So that I only had the first gem of it, the first little, not gem, the first little spark of it, the first few bars, and I wrote the lyrics on the way into the meeting. I mean, there's that on it. It was that. It wasn't unimportant. It was just a job. It was. I'd enjoyed it. That was it. And they offered me. I think you were leaning on this point earlier, or about to mention it. They offered me £200,
Yes.
which was the going rate, and that what would be about 2,000 these days,
Yeah.
maybe if you're talking about 1970s, maybe even a bit more. And I was not particularly in a good place at the bank, and 200 quid would have gone down nicely with my bank manager. But I just sort of had a feeling, and I just said, "I tell you what, why do you not pay me 200, but give me the rights to the characters so that I can exploit them in the nicest possible way, promote them, and help the cause, but at the same time, I need the rights to do that. I didn't even know I was going to dress up as a Womble. I didn't even know I was going to get my mum to make me 4 more costumes to make, a whole band. That was another whole story that, again, it's in the book. Da 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 da. But I just had this feeling that there was something good about these characters, and I was kind of, I mean, yes, from a what do you call it, a career and musical respect point of view. Once I'd had all those hits with the Wombles, and we were the biggest band of 1974. We had the Music Week Award as being the biggest selling singles act of 1974. So to me, it was a joyful time, and it still is looking back on it. But what it did do is it put a great big brick wall up between me and the sort of serious critics of the day and the people who produced Old Grey Whistle Test or the cool people. Now, before, when I'd been in the psychedelic area,
Yes.
um, and had been doing blues and psychedelic records, I'd been this new up and coming cool person that John Peel thought was, going to be the next cool person. And after I'd built that brick wall of the Wombles and had all that commercial success, John Peel literally said, Mike Batt sort of was lost to the creative community, but and it's the creative community's fault for not taking any notice of him when he was younger. But it also meant that he sort of saw me in the same way he saw Mark Bolan, although Mark Bolan became a big star in England. I became a big star in Europe and some other countries, but not in England. And the reason was because the Wombles existed in England, but they didn't, South England in the UK, but didn't have much, if any, success overseas. So I had a clean market, should we say, to go and be the cool Mike Batt
Right.
somewhere else, but
Yes.
not in England, thanks very much, because we saw you as a Womble. and you're to us, you'll always be a Womble, and hence the expression, "Remember, you're a Womble."
Well, what I love about it, Mike, it must have been one of the best business decisions. As you say, there's that artistic conflict, and so what? One of the best business decisions. The figures reported for just in the 70s was a million. Is that a fair figure?
What, that I made out of the Wombles?
Yes.
Oh well, yeah, I would say that would be a good estimate from back then. That was I nearly said back then. That's a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money now,
It's a
but
lot of money now, and it's interesting. This is the point. Is about getting the rights right, and why, as I say, your whole career has been punctuated with this. It's sort of making sure that there's a fair recompense, and it's foresight in those sort of days. The idea of saying, well, I'm not going to go away for 200 quid. I'd like to keep the rights, and as a result of it, you made significantly more than the £1 million, probably a bit more than that, as a result of it.
it was also quite a smart decision, even though they didn't know it at the time. None of us really knew, because I didn't know what I was in for. It could have just gone flop, and that's the end of that, and I didn't have the 200 quid. But to them, it was a good move because what it meant was I was motivated to not make just one single, but follow it up. We had eight hit singles and four gold albums,
Yes.
and that and a pop group that became a national treasure. To the extent that the Queen actually told me she had a dog called Womble when we
Oh, she
met.
did.
Yeah, and so it would perhaps not. I don't think it would have become the national phenomenon that it became. It would have still been loved. It would have been loved
Yes.
because it's lovely. And by its very nature, it deserved to be successful. But I don't think it would have been quite the explosion that it would have been that it became when I was jumping about on top of the pops with my Womble costume on.
But I mean,
And
and talk to me just briefly about the Womble costume then. I mean, did you, I mean, it's extraordinary. How do you perform in a Womble costume? I mean, it's easy, I guess. We're not lip syncing because people couldn't see your lips. So you're doing that. Did you ever have a wardrobe misfunction?
yeah, not an embarrassing one. Well, it depends how embarrassing. Being on the road that goes across the Pennines, is it the M6?
Yeah, yeah.
With a promotion man from when no one knew what Womble was, promotion man from CBS Records, and I had my Womble costume on, and I wasn't going to take it off just to travel. So he was driving, and we pulled in at services. This is not in the book, by the way. So you've got scoop,
Oh, scoop.
and we pulled it into this greasy spoon transport calf, and I wanted to go to the loo. So I thought, oh, hang on now, I've got this great big thing with a zip on it. But you have a beach ball that my mum created to give you fatness at the front, and a beach ball to give you fatness at the back. And you would put extra fatness into yourself by blowing into your beach ball, and it was contained within a kind of I don't know, a vest with a zip again, buttons or whatever. There was quite a lot of stuff in the way of, shall we say, just having a wee. And normally you just go on and do your act, come off, get changed, have a wee, and go home if you wanted one. Although I have to tell you that when you wear a Womble costume and work very hard, you don't usually need a wee because it sweats out.
I was going to say, it must be incredibly hot in there.
Yeah, I'll interrupt my Transport Cafe story to tell you that when we did
Yeah.
Glastonbury, not Berry, I'm being American, they say Glastonbury, don't they? Um, uh, we didn't, none of us sweated, none of us went to the loo all day, and we were trapped in these Womble costumes. It was a fantastic gig, and it was live. We did have microphones inside the heads,
Yeah.
and I had to do everything, sing everything live, and they played everything live as well. It was a brilliant day, one of the best days of my life. I really, really look back on that as a moment in my life. But anyway, meanwhile, back at the Transport Cafe, I wanted to go to the loo. And because I hadn't been working hard all day, I'd just been sitting in the Womble costume, did an
Right.
interview in Birmingham or whatever, or wherever it was on the left-hand side of the M6. And I was on the way to wherever it was, the other, whatever, Leeds or somewhere. And anyway, so I think I better go to the loo, and I think, oh, and I came back out the loo, and said to Jeff, my friend who's the driver, Jeff Gilbert, the head of promotion, can you give me a hand? I've got to try and unzip myself and, you know, use the urinal. Uh, and in the end, to cut a long story short, it ended up we had to get three lorry drivers and Jeff, that's four people, to lift me up at the right angle, high enough above the urinal, so that I could wee without splashing it everywhere all over my Womble costume. And that if I'd tried to put that in the book, it wouldn't have been cut out by the editors, but it would have taken about 4 pages to express it properly. And I was trying to cut the length of it down, make it more readable. But
Yeah.
maybe in the maybe I should issue a sort of a pen. What do you call it? Not a glossary. A sort of addendum
Oh,
to it.
absolutely. We have the updated version as revealed on the Andrew Eborn show. It's
Absolutely
I love it. Mike, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be looking at the continued pattern of your fighting for artists' rights and also looking at the proposals about the data use and access bill. For now, Mike, thank you for joining me.
lovely. I'll be back soon, or you'll be back soon. We'll be back soon.
Together. Hurrah.